You're live now. There you go. Yes, we are live now, Sarah.
Okay.
Welcome everyone. Welcome to all the listeners. Once again, this is your host, Shailesh from New Zealand World News, connecting with real people with real human talk. And today we have the pleasure to invite and to bring all the way from UK, Sarah Spicer. Now, Sarah Spicer introduction is very, very interesting for me because she is a neuro language English coach in UK. But most importantly, I was fascinated because she is making a difference, immense contribution towards the human journey. And language is something that I feel it's very, very important for our communications as a human. So we can communicate with our gestures, with our hands, with our physically, but more communication that people generally do all around the world is by languages. And today we are going to uncover, first and foremost, the life journey of Sarah, like how she went and why she came into this. But language is something very fascinating. So we will uncover a lot of things about languages because she has made a difference to many humans by coaching them and making them understand the importance of language to thrive and to grow in their country like UK, where if you are a non-English speaking person, then obviously you are struggling. But how does that struggle can change into a great growth is a good story that we are going to uncover. But today it's all about Sarah. So I am going to introduce Sarah today to you all, who is a neuro language coach and then she's making a huge difference to all the expats in UK. So I'm going to jump straight into it. Welcome, Sarah, to this beautiful show. And thank you for coming on this show and sharing. We'll be asking you, or we will be uncovering lots of your experiences and your wisdom that all our listeners can listen. Why language is so important and how did you in the first place got into it? So first tell us a little bit about you and then we'll get into it. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me and for that lovely introduction as well. So as you mentioned, I'm an English coach.
Mm.
So at the moment, I help expats from all around the world who come
Mhm.
to the UK to work and are working in a range of different professions,
Yeah.
but feel held back for some reason in their profession, and it's usually related to language and confidence speaking the language and being able to really achieve their potential because their confidence speaking English is holding them back. So that's where I am now.
Mhm.
And I think it's the journey to get here. It's a combination of all my personal experiences as well as my education and things that I've studied have brought me to this point and doing what I'm doing right now.
Right, right. Tell us something as a child or as a very little, what was your goals or what was your likings and what was your
Mhm.
thing that drive you into this?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because I was never into languages. When I was younger and I was studying at school, languages were never really my thing. And I think people are probably quite surprised about that. Most people who go into language teaching loved languages and, were really good at it. And that's why they went into it.
Hmm.
But I've always had more of an interest in people.
Yeah.
When I was really little, and probably throughout childhood, really, I just loved observing people because
Yeah.
I was more of an introvert. I was quiet.
Mm-hmm.
I was more shy, probably. So
Mm-hmm.
even from a really young age, I remember being in primary school, I'd
Yeah.
sit back and I'd observe people and
Mm.
see how they interacted with each other.
Sure.
And it wasn't like I wasn't sociable, I think maybe I seemed not intimidating, so people would always want to be my friend, which
Yeah.
was nice, which was lucky. But I was definitely more fascinated in different kinds of people.
Mm.
Well, I would say. So that's really where I'm coming from. And it's been a theme throughout my life. I'd say. So throughout school. I mean, when I mentioned about languages, in the UK, languages aren't really promoted. I mean, English is the first language. It's the world language now. So there's not that same motivation to learn other languages unless you've had some kind of experience. So I always remember in school, I studied French. This is what everyone did.
Right.
And I was quite good at it, right? I was quite studious. I did all my homework. I ended up getting an A at GCSE. So when you're 16, you take these exams. So I thought I was quite good. Then I went to France. It's a whole different ball game. So even though I knew the language, I had a good knowledge of the language, actually using the language was something different.
Yeah.
And I think being more introverted, being quiet, I didn't put myself out there to experiment with the language. But I'm just talking about holidays here.
Yeah.
So even though on paper I was good at languages, actually in reality and actually using the language to communicate, that didn't come naturally to me, which I think people probably find quite interesting. So anyway, going back to my interest in people, people always ask me, what do you want to study? What do you want to be when you're older, you know? And the theme that I always came back to is I want to help people in some way. And I wasn't sure quite how. Maybe it was in education or something like that. I wasn't quite sure at that point, but I always knew that I wanted to help people. And when just before university, I got to study psychology. And this was like related to my fascination of people. So I really, really, really enjoyed psychology. And that's why I decided to study it at university. So rather than studying languages, that wasn't even on my radar, languages, you know, it was psychology and studying people. So I moved away from my small hometown, you know, living a very sort of sheltered life in Macclesfield, which is a very small town. I moved to Leeds and again had that opportunity to meet lots of different groups of people. But again, I think the common theme is I'd see all these groups at university, these friendship groups, all based around what music do they like or do they like sports? Whereas I never understood how you could just restrict yourself to one group. I always was interested in everyone. So I describe myself as a bit of I floated through different groups. And sometimes I'd hang out with people who like rock music. Sometimes I do hang out with the sporty people. You know, I was just interested in getting to know everyone and not defining who I was really by a certain group. I'm off track a bit here, but I think that all relates back to that interest in people, that interest in psychology.
So you have the interest of different minds and of humans that come across. Very curious about it, it seems like.
Yeah, definitely. And I think being that quieter person who sort of sat back sometimes and just observed, I think that's probably where it comes from.
I want to ask, like, were you also like as a child or when you got meeting people and understanding people or trying to be curious, but do you have that inclination somewhere that I want to also coach people or I want to express myself to people easily? And where were you finding that challenge? What are those challenges that you had initially to interact with people?
Yeah, I think that the challenge for me was probably taking on labels that people gave me.
Right.
When you're quiet, people say, oh, Sarah's a bit quiet, or yeah, she's quite shy, or, you know, and I think I internalized those labels. I was shy, I was quiet, that was me.
Right.
I'm always going to be like this. That's how I'll always be. And for a long time, I went through life. And if I was a little bit more outgoing, I think, oh, people It's against who I am. I'm a shy person. I'm a quiet person. So that was probably the first challenge, and something that I've probably always been working towards overcoming. And in every new situation, whether that's going to university for the first time, teaching for the first time, running a business, this was a whole new thing as well. Through each of those, it's been overcoming those labels that I had, that I can do these things. I'm not just a shy person, which is seen as such a negative thing. Particularly in Western culture. Being quiet isn't celebrated as much as being extroverted. The people that go out there and put themselves out there and talk to lots of people are the ones that get the opportunities. So being able to do more like that has been a challenge for me, I'd say.
Absolutely. So did you had something like traditions, like or set up by your parents or by your surroundings or by your environment that, oh, you can't do this or you had to do this, and you had even while interacting with people? Or was there any kind of a burden, sort of, or any restrictions?
I think it's interesting you say that.
Because at the moment, why I'm asking you this question is, you are a coach, and I would like to know, how did you become to that? Sure, you must be having those challenges or restrictions of
I think both my parents are probably quite quiet in the grand scheme of things as well, and that's probably genetically where I get that from, but also being in that environment as well. And being younger as well, if I didn't answer it, someone asked me a question, I didn't answer straight away, my mum would come in quickly and speak for me, and I think that was quite a common thing. And for her, it's because maybe she felt how she felt in that situation when she was a child, so she wanted to help me out. But in the long term, it doesn't really help you out.
No, exactly.
But other people, communicating. What to do. So I think what's taken me to where I am now is understanding how people feel. A lot of people I work with are introverts, are more quiet. Do you feel worried about putting themselves out there into the world? So I know how that feels. And I think as a coach, if you've been through that experience yourself, you can understand it. And something I've learned over the years as well about being quiet is actually probably what makes me good at my job. Because whereas some people would do all the speaking. I'm actually a lot better at listening, getting to know people, really understanding deeply what the barriers are, what is it about their language that would help them to improve, what are they saying to me which reveals beliefs about themselves that I can see are holding them back. So I think going on that journey to realize actually the way I am, my nature, although it's good to build your confidence and to put yourself out there and do things like this, actually being a good listener, my nature, is actually a positive thing as well, and has helped me to have success with clients and
but how did you get there? Like, what was your trigger point? Like, okay, this is what I like to do. When did you decide, like, okay, I want to get into this language learning? So you had a good kind of understanding or curiosity of humans and knowing. So that was a good point. But what really triggered you to become a coach of language and not any other things?
Not any other coach, Well, this was at university. So as I said, I studied psychology, and it was all very broad.
Yes, psychology was your background,
So, and what I found interesting was psychology of language and culture, and how the culture influenced the way people behaved in certain situations. And it's something that never really occurred to me before, that where you're from and how you grew up could influence the way that you respond in certain situations. And I just had this curiosity about the world. And even though part of me was like, ooh, scared about these things, I wanted to learn more. And whenever I just went on holiday, I'd love learning about the culture, meeting different people.
Yeah.
Food, I love the food as well. So when I graduated, still I was unsure what to do. Did I want to go into educational psychology? I knew I had that. I wanted to help people in some way.
Yeah.
But I had an opportunity to teach English overseas. So it's something lots of British people do.
Yeah.
When they finish university or they have some kind of gap year and they go and teach English abroad.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, this would be good to get some teaching experience. Maybe I can use that to go back when I go back and maybe work in educational psychology. And it was a friend of mine at university said, oh, my dad's living in Thailand at the moment. He was there for a short time. You should go to Thailand. Thailand's great. I was like, yeah, that sounds good. Okay. So I went online, found a teaching course that was in Bangkok, in Thailand, and just booked it. And I did it. And even though I was so scared, I knew if I thought of it, it seemed to go against what everyone thought of me. I was quite quiet. But inside, I just wanted an adventure and to go somewhere new. I knew nothing about Thailand, just booked it. And then after I'd graduated, I worked a little bit just to make some money to make sure I was prepared. And yeah, I went to Thailand with doing this course, but without a job of any kind. I did have a return ticket. My idea was to come back after 4 months. So I was going to do the course, get maybe a bit of teaching experience, and then and then come back to the UK and get on with my life.
Right.
Didn't turn out like that. So I really enjoyed living in Thailand, and I went there with this mentality like, right, I'm not going to be that typical British person abroad, just being, there is a bit of a stereotype. I'm going to be really respectful about the culture, really learn about it, learn the language. And I made quite a lot of progress. And this is from somebody who isn't a language person. I didn't feel that I was any good at communicating. But in that situation, it was different. I was learning to communicate with people, to understand them more, to find out more about them. So I had that motivation to communicate and learn in a completely different way. I wasn't learning to pass an exam and to show everyone, oh, look how good I am at this language. I was learning to communicate. And that was a big shift in my mind of how you really do learn languages. And then I was learning how to be an English teacher. I worked on a few summer camps, so it was quite informal, just because it was around February, March, April time that I was there, and April was like the summertime in Thailand. So I was working on a few summer camps, and with a plan to come back to the UK. And then I was offered a full-time job in a school. So I called my mum. My mum, who'd actually said to me, she was like, so if you go abroad, I feel like you're never going to come back. And I was like, no, I'd never do that. I'd be too scared. And obviously called her up, and she was like, okay, no, that's fine. Whatever you want to do, we support you. So got a contract teaching in a school. I cancelled my flights and that was it. So I stayed in Thailand for about 4.5 years altogether in the end. So teaching a variety of different people, so from children in primary school all the way up to business people, business people who were needing English to do business internationally. So in that 4 years, I got a really good range of experience. And from my own experience, and also seeing how people learn at different ages and the problems that people were having, I think that gave me a really good overview of what that whole process is. And I
Well,
loved it.
yeah,
Yeah.
most importantly, I really appreciate like what you said, but taking that initial step of moving away from your own comfort zone or your own country and going and trying a different country altogether, unknown territory kind of thing, that mindset change or that mindset shift with not knowing what we will end up, but embracing the uncertainties. How did that like happen for you? Was it something that came out of the blue, or was it something that you said, nah, I'm going to do something differently, as you said before, not a typical British family or not a particular mindset that what Britishers do or what traditions, any tradition people do, cultural people do traditionally. You broke that barrier and you went something on your own journey or on your own way. How did that like got into you to take that bold step of going altogether a different country?
Yeah, it's a hard question. I think you get to a point sometimes where there's that balance between your comfort zone,
Yeah.
feeling comfortable, and then the appeal of that urge to learn about that other thing, and also not having many opportunities.
Yeah.
Okay, and thinking, okay, what can I do? I've always wanted, and inside I've always wanted to do these things, but because of these labels, I'm shy,
Yeah.
I'm quiet, that's not something you do. That was always holding
Yeah.
me back. And when my friend said that, I was like, okay, there's someone there who I know, not that we, spent a lot of time together, but there's someone there. So there was some kind of comfort.
Yeah.
And I think something that I've done since then is, if I have this idea, just do it. Just say you do it. Once it's booked, you can't go back then. You can't talk yourself out of it, because as soon as I give myself that time to think, then all the limiting beliefs start coming in, and
Absolutely.
your thoughts start coming in. So
Yeah.
I think it was that tipping that balance of my comfort zone was no longer good enough. There was something pushing me to do something different.
And this is something that all the listeners who are listening currently, you can see that, you can change your mindset. You can change your comfort zone. There's nothing wrong in it. You just have to accept, and you have to take bold enough that decision of your own for your own, and then let the universe give you what you have to give. I think that positive outcome for you is absolutely must be happy and refreshing for you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think throughout the years, there's been this shift of realizing that who you are when you're younger is not who you are. You can change these things. And with the comfort zone and the confidence, this is something I share with my clients now, is that the best way to be confident is to do the thing that you're not confident about. That's it. And that's how you get outside of that comfort zone.
I love
You
this.
push the barriers. And so and just like with learning Thai, you learn by doing. And
learn by doing.
That's what I did.
Well, that's a great message to all the listeners that, where you are not confident, do those things that you are not confident.
Exactly. And as long as they're not so far out of your comfort zone,
of course,
they will just fill you full of fear, and it would be.
But embracing that uncertainty is very key. Embracing that uncertainty of not having confidence, but gaining that confidence. When you do something without confidence, then you are gaining that confidence as well at the same time.
Absolutely. And that, I don't know whose quote it is, but I remember seeing it. Action comes before confidence, or action creates confidence.
All right.
Okay, that makes sense. Whereas before I was always thinking you have to be confident in order to do those things.
No. You're right. Action comes first.
Yeah, you have to do those things, and then you get the confidence, and that's
Yeah, that's a beautiful. Like, I like people who wants to share their experiences as you have sharing currently, as we can see that, and uncovering those positive outcomes and uncovering those resonation that people generally don't try to take the step in anticipation or in expectation. Whereas what you did is everything without expectations, but then did it and then got the whole idea of everything. So that's
Yeah.
yeah. So at
Right.
this moment, if I have to ask you, sorry, if I have to
That's
ask
okay.
you at this moment, you have been like dealing with so many human minds, with so many people want to learn English, and they are non-English speaking. So they are like, as I always compare them with the non-confident people. So they are not confident about the English, so they want to learn English so that they can be confident about English or the language that they want to learn from you. So when you have all these different background, different cultures coming to you,
Mm.
how do you, what are the challenges that you face and how do you overcome those challenges with different barriers? Because everybody is unique and
Yeah.
everybody has got their own kind of, how do you make those comfort into positives, like discomfort into comfort?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. Everyone's
Hmm.
different and comes with their own challenges and beliefs. So
Hmm.
you've got the
Yeah.
beliefs about themselves. Are
Yes.
they good at languages? Like me, when I was learning French, I didn't think I was good at language. That was a big barrier that
Hmm.
held me back. So they come with that first of all. Then there's the beliefs about the language itself. Well,
Hmm.
it's too difficult to learn. There's no way I can learn that. It's too different to my first language.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and also, there's their beliefs about how to learn a language. With many people, especially with English, they've been learning English for many years. Most people that I work with have studied English their whole life, since even primary school for some people.
Right.
But they've learnt it as a subject at school, just like my
Mhm.
experience of French. And so they think there's this certain way of learning, like studying all the grammar,
Mm,
uh, making sure you get 100% on tests. So
mm,
it's this striving for perfection all the time.
mm.
So what my challenge is to help people and guide people to shift that perspective,
Sure.
so that it's not about being perfect. The actual way that you're going to get comfortable with the language
Mhm.
is using the language, and in order to do that, you're going to have to make a few mistakes.
Mm.
If
Absolutely.
you but that's where we learn, and that's been a big learning point in my life. Is it's those mistakes aren't failures, they're opportunities to
Yeah,
learn.
this is definitely, as listeners are listening, this is definitely all about you today. But we will dwell on the topic as we had earlier thought about how language can be labeled and how languages are identified as labeling and all that we will discuss in our next topic. But today, I wanted to uncover and discover everything that you had barriers of labels. You had your own kind of challenges of those, and you overcome those. But you also completely went out of your comfort zone to altogether a different country, altogether a different culture, different background, different thing. And there you made a mark of your own with all those uncertain times and uncertain things that you did. So this is fascinating for all the listeners who are listening, that you have to come out of your comfort zone. You don't have to worry about whatever comes to your mind, you can do it. That's what I can see here. So moving on, I wanted to interact on this. Another thing that comes to my mind is, like, with different barriers of different languages and different cultures that you were mentioning, the challenges generally you face, like, in the classroom when we are there in the school, like you have, as a student, we get frustrated if we don't understand. We get frustrated if we can't learn immediately. And if somebody is telling us 10 times the same thing, we also get more annoyed or frustration. How do you deal with these kind of challenges with the different people that come to you And what's your mindset at that point? That how do you change those for yourself?
Yeah, I think
How do you
people do.
adjust? Hmm.
People get frustrated. I think having worked in traditional English teaching as well,
Yeah.
you know, you see different kinds of learners and they approach it in different ways as well. And it can be so frustrating when you just don't get something. And when I do the coaching, I'm working with people one-to-one.
Hmm.
And it's big for me to find the way that works for them. Like there's no one way of learning English. I can give you some guidance, and definitely getting out there and using it is going to be the key way. But for me, it's listening to the client, finding out what those problems are and finding the method that works for them.
Hmm.
So if it's finding different ways of explaining the language and something, so I've been a qualified neuro-language coach.
Wow. Okay. So you have neuro
Yeah.
language. Yeah.
So
Hmm.
that I've gone through the teaching and now into the coaching. And neuro-language coaching is related to how the brain learns languages and how even emotional responses are a barrier and can be a barrier to you actually communicating as well. So one of the things is recognizing that the brain learns in different ways and how we can calm the brain. So it's easier to learn different things, but also making connections to the first language. Often people find if they can see, say there's a certain grammar point, a tense, for example, that doesn't exist in their first language, then they can make that connection, even if it's a negative connection, when they're comparing to their first language, that helps the brain to sort of understand it and process it a bit more.
Yeah.
But also seeing similarities as well, just to help. And when you see there's more similarities than differences, it can really help people to overcome those barriers.
So did you come across anywhere while teaching or while coaching these different cultural background people that they come across to you to learn and predominantly, but you have got a predominantly, you must be having some sort of like a technique or way of strategy to make them comfort or to make them, understand.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Yeah, that's okay.
The problem with going live, apologies for that.
That's all right. We are just casual talking.
In my career, I've worked with lots of people from different countries and had classrooms with people from lots of different cultures as well. So they're managing different expectations all in one place. And I would say the key really is to create your own culture, your own guidelines within that classroom. So what's expected. So I remember I worked with lots of people from the Middle East, and sometimes during the class they'd get up and they'd be like, I've got a phone call, and walk out. And in British culture, that's seen as quite rude, just getting out, just going out. You might stop the call and go later. But when you learn deeper into the culture, you learn more about the culture. This is acceptable in business meetings. If someone's there and it's more important, that's absolutely fine. So it's finding that balance and then creating your own culture within the setting, whether it's in a group or one-to-one, setting the boundaries, setting the expectations.
Sure.
Is the key thing. So everyone knows where they are, where they feel comfortable. Right. But then within that, and especially working with people who are expats who are working in the UK, that cultural aspect of languages is so important for them to learn. So what is generally expected in these different situations, just to help them to build those connections, build those relationships. If you know what generally the tendency is, you're less likely to have those misunderstandings. And And again, that's a big, if you think about it, language is all about building relationships. That's what it's
Absolutely.
about, whether in your personal life, your work life. And that's where people sometimes have a block, even if they have the language, it's just not understanding the culture. Yeah. If I gone off track, I may have distracted by my dog. I do apologize.
That's all right. Yeah, because as you said, like, the communication tool, one of the important tools of communication is languages. No matter where you come from, which culture you come from, what background you come from, language is one of the major tools to communicate. But then cross languages, when they come together, so when people come to you to learn English, which they are coming from non-English, and that's where our mindset, our challenges, that how do I communicate, how do I make more comfortable, easy to understand, otherwise interpretation can be totally different. There are so many things that interfere and that we interpret in a differently, so we don't understand. So did you find any of those kind of challenges in your coaching style, that okay, I have to tell this person this is the meaning of this is this, not this, and this is this, not that? Is that something?
It's actually a huge part of what I do, and not necessarily with my style of coaching, but with the barriers that they face in the UK. But I thought, like I said before, it's about establishing your expectations. Something that I found recently, actually, I work a lot with people from Poland, and there's a lady in particular who's from Slovakia, and it's more direct in their communication style, whereas the British communication style, in many cases, is more indirect. So if we think that somebody's going to feel upset by what we say, or it's an inconvenience, we use quite indirect language. You wouldn't say, please make your dog quiet. This is quite direct. But you would say something like, would you mind making your dog quiet? Or would you mind? So you're making it a question, even though what you're trying to say is, your dog is quiet. Just in this interview. That can be a big barrier for people to understand. In terms of that. So I have to be very aware of the language I use, depending on who I'm speaking to. But also when it comes to feedback, and this lady from Slovakia, at first we do an exercise. So often I do a kind of speaking exercise, and at the end I'll give feedback. But I will always focus on the positive first. And then give them, the not negative feedback, but points that they can focus on. And she was like, just tell me it. Just tell me. You don't have to tell me good things. Just tell me what I need to improve. I don't mind. And I think that's quite a common way of giving feedback. In more direct cultures, is just to go directly to what they need to change. Whereas, so with that lady in particular, I had to sort of establish why I'm doing what I'm doing. And it's not just culture. There is a reason behind it as well, because I want people to be aware of the positive things that they're doing as well, to ensure that they're aware of the full picture. What can they do well? What can they improve? So when it comes to the culture, it's important to explain why you're doing what you're doing.
That is important. And I think that's where the communication or transparency of communication is very important, of prime importance. You can't just leave it by saying it. If they don't understand it, they will just interpret whatever they want to, right? Basically. So making sure that they have understood.
It's so true. And like I say, lots of people from Poland, Slovakia, these more direct cultures, they'd say, if a British person is very roundabout in what they say, would you mind doing this for me? They see that as untrustworthy. It's like, why aren't you just telling me what you mean? Whereas the intention behind
Yeah.
the British person was to be polite,
Yeah, was
and
to
to
be.
pray, and to make sure they feel okay.
Mm,
So that wasn't the intention. But then when that person says something very direct back,
mm,
British person,
mm,
they intend that person from Poland, for example, intends it to be transparent and so they know what you mean. But the
mm,
British person interprets that as, it's very rude.
mm,
It's so rude. And you can see how these misunderstandings form, and it
mm, mm, mm,
creates that barrier
mm.
for people. So even though they know all the words, they know the grammar, they know what they're saying, but still they're feeling some kind of barrier to building those
Yeah,
relationships, this cultural misunderstanding.
absolutely, absolutely. And that is something that, you face, you must be facing every single moment of your challenges that, I don't want to be rude, or I don't want to be non-communicative, or I don't want to, give wrong impression, basically. These mind challenges that you face every single moment, and with those connections with different humans, what are the things that, when these are the challenges that you face, how do you make those turn into those positives of your life, that hey, this is part and parcel of my teaching coaching, but I have to be positive. And so positive means what? How do you manage your mind at that point, to not go into a different direction altogether, basically?
Mm.
Can we say, as a psychological, you are a psychological background, you do have, plus this is neuro language that you are actually
Mm.
have done. So obviously you are aware of lots of things, and I guess is calmness that you do as a positive to listen, as you said. I think that's, you said already, I think, that you are a good listener and you like to listen, not all the time talking, right?
Yeah.
That,
Yes.
that could help. That helps for as a positive that can become.
Yeah, absolutely. I think listening and being open and staying curious as well. And also when we get into this talking about culture, you can get into labeling, and it was the labels when I was a child that held me back. So I don't want to label someone from the UK is like this or someone is like this. It's seeing each person as an individual.
Correct. Yeah.
But being aware of these tendencies, because there are tendencies, but obviously we're more than just the country that we come from. There's so
Yeah.
many different influences that create the person that we are
Yes, I agree.
today. So it's seeing that person as an individual, but then having conversations around these differences. And people love having those conversations. It's just
Yeah.
really interesting. And it helps people to learn more about themselves,
Yeah.
but actually find out who they are at the core, despite, what your nationality or your gender, or who are you inside and what is it you want to express.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally understand that bit. So that's cool. Tell me something about, like, when it comes to, day to day, when now somebody new comes altogether, how you make yourself positive, that you said, like before, like you're open, you're transparent, but you are open. Main thing is accept, and the tendency you have to accept just the way humans, just the way they are. So how do you put that into the reality? Because many people are shy, as you said, and as you were before as well when you were little. But so when people are shy, when people are not really, they think that, oh, how do I say if I go wrong, or if I do wrong, if I do mistake, they feel a bit, conscious about that. So how do you make them open up with your positive mind?
It's a good question. Just giving people the space to speak. What I
Yeah.
mentioned when I was younger, and when somebody asked me a question and I was still trying to form an answer, but my mum came in and said it first.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
In case my mum sees this, I'm very grateful for everything. But
No, no, I
And
understand.
I think not doing that and giving people space to speak, and even if there's an awkward silence, what people would describe, I love an awkward silence, because
Mm-hmm.
actually you're allowing people time to
Mm,
think, process, and to, particularly if you're learning a language, to form that sentence,
mm.
giving that space and that time, embracing the silence,
Yeah, yeah.
people open up, and asking them. I think when you share something about yourself,
Mm,
people are more willing to share about themselves as well.
mm,
So I think if you can be open and honest
mm,
and not worry if you make mistakes
mm,
yourself,
mm.
that can give people the confidence as well to do that. And
Absolutely.
just to be supportive, a lot of praise and encouragement when
Mm.
it comes back to neuroscience, those little dopamine hits in the brain, it's all reinforcing itself and
Yeah.
helping them to move on. And if they can become confident communicating with me, then the next step is, okay, maybe join a group. I do have a
Okay.
free meetup group actually,
Uh-huh.
where for expats in the UK, and we have a Zoom call like this. Everyone introduces themselves, and they have one-to-one
Mm,
conversations. So that's kind of the next step to building their confidence.
mm.
When that becomes more comfortable, then they can go out and build their confidence in different areas, and that's really the process.
Yeah. Okay.
I forgot your first question
Yeah. Yeah. So where do you see now at the moment in your life journey
now.
that where you have come from with the similar kind of changing mindsets? Because adapting, accepting different people, different cultures, and then finding yourself, what do you see the connections that you have made all this time? And then moving forward, you don't find any challenges, you can still make those connections in spite of the challenges. If I had to
Mm.
ask you, like, how do you put yourself now in this situation currently? If I had to ask you, for all the listeners who are listening, I will tell everything like what you have said, like how to become positive, or what are the positive aspects that we can take from today's conversation. But most importantly, I want to ask you, with your own journey, how do you see yourself moving from these changes that you have made, or have you made any changes, or you think there are so many still yet to uncover or embrace the uncover uncertain?
Yeah, I'm sure there's many things to uncover,
Yeah,
but I think in my journey of being a business owner,
yeah,
this was a big challenge for me, and
sure.
that's shifted my perspective on many things.
Mm,
Um, and I think with building confidence is
mm,
a huge thing. Building connections, I've always been quite good at that, but I think realizing that not everyone's going to like you, and
mm,
that's okay. It's a
yeah.
big thing for me. And if I had a disagreement with someone, or I felt that person didn't like me, I'd think, it's because of me. What have I done wrong? I need to change.
Mm,
Whereas, like everything, it's sort of finding that balance, being when you sort of know who you are inside and you feel comfortable with that, it's okay,
mm,
And I suppose the same when it comes to coaches and coaching people.
yeah.
I'm probably not the right coach for everyone,
Mm,
and that's
good.
absolutely fine. I will try my best to help that person if I can, but if we always have a first session that's free just to get to know each other. If we
Mhm.
don't think it's right, that's absolutely fine and move on. And I think that's a big thing to remember in life, that it's okay. It's okay to be yourself. So I think if when I carry on in this way, the
Mm,
right people come into your life,
mm,
and they're the ones that you can help. And I've noticed over the past, I'd say 2 years or something, being more in this and being more confident to just be myself,
mm,
you attract more of the right people, the people who really need your help, and the
mm,
ones that you can really help.
mm.
So just need to do more of that, really.
Yeah, and I think that's a very well said, because you have got so many, as you said, like we have got so many things to uncover. Plus, we have got
Mhm.
so many abundance of people needing help. So even if, and there is things for everyone, I personally feel that this resonate with me, that there's so much abundance, so you don't have to worry if somebody doesn't like you or somebody doesn't resonate with you or understand you. That's not an issue. That's actually giving more opportunities for others to come into your journey, to come into your life, and you going into others' lives. So that's absolutely a positive aspect of mindset that you have, which is all I can take from here, the positive outcomes of your
And
journey.
I would say changing my focus to other people,
Mm-hmm.
what has helped me to do that, and it's what I help clients with as well. So I think even though I was always interested in other people, obviously I was worried about what they were thinking of me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I find this with clients, it's just really interesting. Like if they're speaking to somebody at work, say, and they pause,
Mm,
they think, oh, they're going to think my English is not very good. It's going to be terrible.
mm,
So they speak very quickly to seem more fluent.
mm,
Whereas it's actually the opposite is true. And they're assuming that person thinks their English isn't good enough. But
mm.
actually pause more, give that person time to think and process. That person will understand their message more.
Yeah.
It's just interesting that difference between what you think other people are thinking
Mm,
and what they're actually thinking about you. So
mm,
if we can shift our focus on helping other people,
mm,
how can you help this person to understand? How,
mm,
you know, everything changes
mm.
really, and you're less focused on worrying about, is my English good enough?
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying right? Because you're focused on helping other people.
See, I want to extend on this question, which you said, yeah, you want to help. The question is, if there are many people who wants to help, but they don't know how to help, or they don't understand how to help. But what, in your view, would be, if you have got the passion to help, but then you don't know the opposite person, whether that person needs help or not. That's one part only, but you are definitely wants to help. So that's a big challenge itself, to make sure that how others can relate to you, resonate with you, and understand you, and take your help or take your guidance, that kind of thing. How would you make that kind of simple transition in your mind, that you are prepared for whatever it comes, whether that person likes or not? I am ready to help. So how do you prepare yourself for their mind?
So how do you prepare yourself
Yeah, to help
to
others.
help others? Well, I think that's something that maybe just comes naturally, that you want
Mm,
to help. But I think the problem comes is many people don't want to be helped,
mm.
which is something that I've learned over the years, and from myself as well. I know when people tell you what to do, I can help you. This is what you should do. You should do this. You should do
Yeah,
this. Do this. My brain would switch down like, oh, stop telling me what to do, and feeling attacked. And that's where being open, being approachable,
mm,
and allowing people to come to you when they need the help, I think that's what it is. And when it comes to coaching, I think the best way to do that is
yeah.
things like this, getting out there, letting everybody see what you do and how you can help people, but not forcing it on people, because
Mm,
like you say, people need to be ready to be helped, you
absolutely,
know,
absolutely.
and listening, being supportive is the key thing. And then until they come to ask you for help.
I think you said that very well, because allowing people to talk and listening to them is one of the two important positive aspects of that. You have to keep your mind open, and that's where you show that your positiveness, that you are ready to listen, plus you are also allowing them to talk and listen to yourself. So I think this is one of the takeaways from this conversation. I can see that there's a good positive outcomes for all the listeners who wants to help and who wants to seek others, give them some guidance or give them little help that you can make. First, try to become a good listener. That's, I would say, with this
Yeah, I
conversation.
would say so.
And also,
Exactly.
yeah. And your message was very nice, that allow others to talk. That's, I think, is the very key to make it acceptance for them, that, okay, that person is not making me uncomfortable, but allowing me to talk anything that I want, basically. So yeah, no, so that's a brilliant kind of understanding that we can all listen to Sarah, to you today. But I am almost now coming to an end. I still have got a few more minutes, but before that, I wanted to finally ask you, like, at this point of time of your journey, you have done, this language has been very fascinating, and it's absolutely the most important form of communication is language. That means you get an opportunity to communicate every single day in and day out. What would you say to those people as a message, like how important this communication is? Either way, whatever language you communicate, how do you communicate? It's not, but you got to keep communicating. So I'm going to ask you a little bit of devil's advocate and say, what if Sarah doesn't have communication, want to communicate? What would Sarah do if she don't want to communicate? How would she feel? How would she react? Or what was her reaction? And is it really we as a humans should be doing this, or we should be just communicating, if I have to ask you?
Yeah. Well, I was just thinking of a life without communication, and
Yeah.
really sad, because I think that's our means to connect with people. And something that I've realized through the pandemic, when we first went into lockdown,
Mhm.
my natural introverted self was
Yeah.
like, "Oh, yes, I've got some time to be on my own." And that's an awful thing to say, isn't it, really? But part of me was
Yeah.
quite grateful to have that space. And obviously, it was awful, the things that were happening.
Mm.
But as an introvert, and I'm sure there's other introverts out there that can identify, having some time to think and to have some space and not having to socialize all the time was quite
Mm.
a positive thing. But throughout those 3 years, has it been now,
Mm.
having fewer connections. I mean, it's great that we can communicate online,
Yes, I
but
know.
not communicating as much with people face to face made
Mm.
me just feel really sad and down, and I didn't know what it was really. And it was not having that communication. So I think a life without communication would be terrible, because I think the key to life is building relationships, and that's ultimately what I'm helping people to do. When you build relationships, this is when amazing things happen, whether it's in your personal life or
Yeah.
business life, work life. It's all about communicating in order to build those relationships. And
So
just remembering communication is a two-way process,
I
not
know.
just about
Yeah,
speaking.
absolutely. Very well said that communication is a two-way process. But during COVID, I guess I want to stress that point since you brought up COVID. What
Yeah,
was
sorry.
your 3 years mindset like when you didn't had to do communication one-on-one or in person, and everything was all switched on to online? How was your positives that you came out of it? What were the positives for you at that point?
Yeah, I think it was, I have to say, it was great for my business, because previously doing things online, I think people had the mindset of, oh, it's not as valuable online
Yeah,
compared
so
to
true.
face.
Mm, mm,
But I found there's so many benefits of particularly doing one-to-one coaching online.
mm,
You're not in somebody else's space. It's like you're equal, and there's not that.
mhm.
I don't know. Usually I was going to people's houses to do one-to-one,
Right.
and it can be quite uncomfortable. They're comfortable in their house,
Mhm.
but there's some kind of dynamic going on there. So that
Yeah.
was the first thing. I think the second thing, being able to record the
Yeah.
sessions so people can go back and look and
Mm.
remember, and that
Yeah.
was so beneficial as well. And
Mm.
there's so many tools. And when it comes to networking,
Mm.
like you making
Yeah.
connections across the other side of the world
I
is
know. It's beautiful.
fantastic as well.
Mm.
So as much as I complain that there were fewer human connections, it's like I always come back to this as well. It's finding that balance in everything, you know,
Mm.
being able to do work online, but also being able to connect with people face to face as well.
Absolutely. There's nothing better communication than meeting humans in person or
Mm.
having that connection in person, because that's what who we are, that's what we are. So we missed that during that time. But lots of positives came. We connected with lots of people. There were lots of, strangers. We made friends. And so that was one of those, I mean, we call strangers as labels, but to be honest, like for me, in your own family, sometimes you can be stranger. And so it's not about labeling the strangers. It's about connecting and connections and communication. As long as you keep communicating, that's what we humans are made for. So, no, thanks so much, Sarah. Want to go now to the last bit. Is what's your final message to the audiences who are listening today? We get beautiful insights from you today, and I took the positives is like, first and foremost, positives is like be confident and be. I like that phrase when you said, when you are not confident, that's what you have to do, those things when where you are not confident. So try to get into those things where you are not confident so that you can learn more out of it, and you become confident automatically, and you can uncover a lot of things that you are confident of. So many things, because you haven't tried, you don't know. So that's a great positive message that today for all the listeners I can take from here. But also, as you said rightly, is the communication. Without communication, we won't be here. And languages is the key for all communications, for all, any language, any diverse, any culture, any background. So there are lots of positives that I can take today from your conversation. So having said that, what will be your final message to the audiences who are listening in terms of your, what you have discovered and uncovered in your life journey, when it comes to languages, when it comes to communication, and when it comes to who Sarah is as a person? What your message for others who are listening, that everything, what is your message to the audiences as a positive? What would you say? That they should be doing this or that or whatever?
The first thing that comes to mind, and I think it's everything comes back to this, is be yourself. And I know it's such an easy thing to say, but quite a difficult thing to do. And whether you're speaking in a different language, you're living in a different culture, when you can get in touch of who you are deep inside,
Yeah.
away from the labels of your country, of what you've grown up as, if you can communicate that really is the key to building authentic relationships, making those connections, and living your best life, really.
I think, to all the listeners, we are going to come to an end now. And the final message, what Sarah said, is absolutely, breaking all the barriers. And I think what I can take from here, the conversation we had when she started, she said there were labels for her. And I think all the listeners, please, you can remove your own labels. You don't have someone to remove those labels. And when you remove those labels, you create amazing journey for yourself. That will be my final message, Sarah, to all the audiences and listeners. And we will definitely dwell on a topic which is language versus identity, or how language can become identity of a human, and how language can become a label for a human. But that's not who we are. But that's a topic for another day. But today, thank you so much, Sarah, for this beautiful conversation that I had with you. And I would love to
Thank you so much for having me, Shailesh. It's great. And I think I've discovered some new things about myself through this conversation as well. So it's always a positive thing. Thank you.
Always the positives. There you go. We are ending on a positive note that I learned from Sarah, and Sarah has learned a little bit of herself rather than it, which is great. And that's a good positive note. And we are going to end here and we will come back. And yes, please do write to us if you have any questions with regard to the languages that you are fascinated about this. Please get in touch. I will be putting contact details of Sierra and you can get in touch with her or let us know your feedback and your thoughts, which we will try to answer in our next episode. Thank you so much once again. Thanks, Sarah. Beautiful.